Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Iowa soccer supporters. Ben Brackett here with my good buddy and co-host Blake Sievers. Sieves, welcome to Soccer Talk. What's up, man?
Good afternoon, Ben. We're in a little different spot today, so it's we'll see how we do.
Shout out to our boy Chris Hoffman for setting us up with this portable audio setup here, right?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a good little plug. Clyde's Fine Diner down East Village.
They're doing takeout right now.
Some of the best burgers this side of the Mississippi.
That's for sure. Wednesday through Saturday is what they're currently operating in the evenings, doing takeout only. But I hear there's a grand opening or whatever you want to call it coming up.
Nice, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And if you got some extra money laying around, join the supporters club.
Yeah, right on.
There's our little plug. Get some swag.
We took a little road trip just here in the last couple days and drove all over town, didn't we?
We didn't. So if you have joined the supporters club and have not received your swag, slide into the DMs because they all should have gone out and been delivered. I mean, we were delivery men there for
we were.
afternoon.
Yeah, for sure. We were like the Amazon guys. If you're paying attention to our social media, which I'm sure you are, keep your eyes peeled for all of our supporters like rocking that swag, right?
That's right. So should get into it today, Ben. So our last podcast was record number of downloads and listens within the first day, the first weekend, the first week. So we're trying to kind of ride that wave of momentum and continue the CDL, ISL, ISA conversation.
Correct. Yeah. So we we're gonna have we had Matt Carver on just recently to sort of as a representative of the Iowa Soccer League and the we'll call them community clubs. And we put out the feelers with a couple different members of the CDL, Club Development League, and at this point they aren't interested in coming on to chat with us. We've got Kurt Lewis planning to come on and join us to speak a little bit about Iowa Soccer League on their behalf, but also as an ODP coach and a high school coach who's he's the head of Iowa High School Soccer Association. So just another perspective that we're going to kind of add to the conversation along with Dan Cataldi here in the next week. And then today we've got Matt Sahag, also known as the Titan Tactician, but not today. He's just Matt Sahag.
No alias today.
No alias. So he's coming on to discuss or kind of help us discuss just the information that we see, and then ultimately he comes to the table with a business proposal, doesn't he?
He does. That's a great tease.
I love it. Well, so let's just hop in and to speak to the person who is normally known as the Titan Tactician, Matt Sahag. All right, Matt Sahag, welcome to the pod.
It's
nice to see you again.
Good to be with you guys. It's been a while.
Yeah, you kind of got a different hat on for this episode than the Titan Tactician, right?
I was going to introduce him like that, but then I didn't.
I'm surprised you got the invite, but I'll try my best.
Well, we brought you on today to talk about just some of the meat and potatoes of what the Club Development League is, because I know that it's something that's interesting to you. And this week there's the big announcement from Iowa Soccer Association announcing that they had denied the CDL's bid to make it a state cup league, if you will. Is that your understanding, Blake?
Yeah, that would be, I think, a good way to put it. The CDL applied to have their league be a qualifier for the Iowa State Cup Championship Series.
So before we start getting into it with Matt, do you want to just talk about the letter? Some of the highlights of the letter. Did you you got everything all printed out, look ready to go?
Yeah. So back and forth. So I think this is the latest letter. Not sure if it'll be the final one or if there's still some stuff going back and forth between the groups, but Iowa Soccer sent the letter out from the board. I guess Peter Catundu and Dan Cataldi both signed it on behalf of the board of directors, and Dan with being the executive director of Iowa Soccer. So they wanted to kind of point out that they're committed to providing the best experience for every player, and they listened to most of the clubs. They got a lot of input from everybody, and I think it just says that overwhelmingly the clubs believe having all kids under one umbrella will provide the best experience for players in Iowa. And, the state empathizes
Does that work?
with coaches and club staff who work full-time to provide great experiences to players and their families. And the state recognizes this model provides different challenges compared to clubs with few or no paid staff. Ultimately, they will not approve the CDL as a state cup qualifying league. However, the conversation is not going to end here, or should not end here. I guess I'll quote, should not end here.
And so we do have plans to have Dan come on the pod, hopefully in the next week or so. He's got a busy schedule, of course. So we're hoping to have him come on and talk a little bit more about just what ISA is doing overall and with the Iowa Soccer League. So we will get that perspective. It sounds like.
Yeah, so like you said, Ben, we got the non-CDL or the ISL represented with Matt Carver last episode. We're going to get the Iowa Soccer Association's perspective, and hopefully the CDL will maybe change their thoughts and want to come on, since we got denied once.
Yeah, correct. But so that's what we got Matt here today. Mostly due to your expertise as a former coach here locally. You got your B license. You coached at three of the CDL clubs through the years.
That's fair.
Is that a good set? Oh, and he's also repped at quite a high level. If you're wondering about that. Anyway, so yeah, why don't you just you want to jump in there? Or?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, like you said, I mean, I started coaching here in the Des Moines area when I was 22, and
That was, just for everybody's reference, that was
2003.
18 years ago. Almost.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Blake. So I guess I don't know if that was a dig or are you trying to give me some credibility?
Just trying to let everybody know, like, you've been in Des Moines now coaching.
Yeah, for almost 20. Yeah, I've been in Des Moines for over 20 years now, coaching for about 18. And so, of course, I started, the game's grown a lot in the last 20 years here, I think. And so I started off in Ankeny Soccer Club. It's now the Rush. So I left there before that happened. But I've coached at Ankeny. I've coached JUC and some of the sporting teams. And then most recently, I had a very, very short stint at VSA this past spring, too, preceding the CDL announcement. So I've seen how those organizations operate and run. And so I guess, like, to the extent that I can maybe provide a little bit of perspective from that end. But it really is unfortunate. The saying, I mean, there's two sides to every story. And so right now, I think we've definitely got one side. We've got the conclusion that sort of the governing body came from. But what we don't have is the CDL's side, apart from the brief response that we got.
Right. But you can online find the rules and regulations, and you can see sort of what they're like to apply to the league, what it requires.
Sure. Yeah. And
so that's where we're getting a lot of our information.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where I'm getting my info.
Keep the league, and then I mean they've got, and I know I was copied on communication. It gives the club standards, for the CDL, and I think really that ultimately the standards that they set forth seem to be the reason why Iowa Soccer said no to the league for now in its current form, and really why the community clubs or the 71 other clubs, weren't happy with the type of league that was proposed. I think initially this summer there was just the shock of the league. The announcement, the timing of the announcement came right around tryouts, and then you had just the fact that no one knew what the application process is, how the current clubs got into so there was shock just about what is this league, what's its purpose, and why is it being sanctioned. And now months later, after we're not really in a critical sort of period for clubs to retain the memberships, it seems like things settled down a little bit. The CDL kind of made another pass at becoming a sanctioned league. But I think what stopped it ultimately now really are at least from what we can tell, are the club and the individual standards that the CDL set forth as a criteria. Thankfully.
You want to just run through those for us, just so that I think maybe before you do that, I think one thing that Blake and I have come across, so we can jump in if you feel like you can add something, Steve's, but we've talked to some folks who have just kids, like they're just parents, and they don't know anything about any of this stuff, right?
I think that's, yeah, absolutely. That's fair to say. We've been hearing stuff through the grapevine. And I think the last podcast, we got quite a bit of feedback, but also record number. I mean,
A lot of listens.
Yeah,
A
record
lot of
number of downloads and listens. So, I mean, do you want to just, is that what you're looking for, Matt, just to run through the standards really quick? Or
Yeah, because I get to play dummy here. I knew you guys were going to do your research, so I'll let you do it.
Well, I'll jump in. Yeah, well, I'll jump in real quick too. I mean, I think, one point of feedback I would have to, I think the CDL clubs, the 71 clubs, and then Iowa Soccer as well, is that, I mean, all this stuff should really be published on everyone's social media. This is a big deal in Iowa Soccer because it's really I would call it's been a battle between the two, the CDL clubs and the non-CDL clubs, and it's been a big decision for Iowa Soccer to make because the CDL clubs, as I understand, are threatening essentially to say, hey, we may just pull all the way out of Iowa Soccer, which, according to their letter, would pull potentially 33% of the players, the revenue out of Iowa Soccer. And so this is a big deal, and I just don't think many people know about it. I mean, I've even talked to, board members at certain clubs who really have no idea what's going on. And I think generally the parents and the players, ultimately, they don't really understand what the club development league is, or even this sort of negotiation process. And it's important. So I think it should be published.
We're at a bit of a crossroads, I think, for Iowa Soccer League. For somebody who's like myself, who's played since we were five years old locally, that's about 30 years, which is crazy to think. But we've complained sometimes it doesn't, like, while things have, like, players have gotten better, things have changed some. Overall, there's still a lot of the same stuff, the same issues are still in place. And here we are. This is something that could really, really make a change.
Yeah, I think on that point you guys said, I think we're pretty knowledgeable. I think that's fair to say as far as kind of being able to understand what's going on. So, but we also have a ton of questions and aren't 100% following reasons or whatnot. So I think if we're a little bit confused and have questions, I think, like to your point, Matt, there's a lot more people that have more questions and are less understanding. So I guess that would be a good thing to recommend to all the entities involved is publicize this information outside of a website. A lot of people are on social media, publish it there, send a link there. To me, I think what you said, Matt, all three groups that are at the table that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, this is a topic that, you may get more engagement in your social media feeds than you otherwise would. For example, I mean, parents and players may come in and talk about, their experience in the ISL or why, what they would like to see improve or why they may not like it or why they do like it. Same thing with the CDL. I mean, the CDL still ran a season this past in the fall. So, what was the feedback from it? And so I think just publishing that would create some transparency, and then also get you from some feedback ultimately from some of your members, and at least the members who are comfortable with voicing their opinions.
Yeah, so real quick, just is that what you want to do? But just real quick, the standards that the CDL is implemented is number one, commitment to ethical standards on game days towards coaches, players, parents, and referees. Number two, follow and comply with the rules and structure of the CDL, which specifically central game sites and gender-specific game days that'll be rotated throughout the season. And this potentially may minimize or eliminate the ability for clubs to play home games. And CDL, the standard for that, central sites are used to facilitate coaching coverage, referee pools, and scheduling. Number three, each club must provide a league representative who can attend daytime meetings. Number four, each club must have a technical leader or a league representative with at least a U.S. Soccer B license, a USC Premier Diploma, or a UEFA equivalent license. Number five, each club must have an additional staff member with a U.S. Soccer C license or higher or equivalent actively coaching within the club. Number 6, each club must have a grassroots instructor who is available to teach courses. Number 7, coaches on the sideline must have a minimum of an online 11v11 grassroots license. And then by the start of the spring 2020 CDL season, all coaches must have a minimum of a D license or a UFC national diploma. And then new coaches will have 1 year to attain a D license or the diploma. And then here's where I get a little bit lost, as we're at number 8, and some of the correspondence between the groups is number 8 through 13 have been left off. So I'm not sure if they're negotiating here, but number 8 is each club must maintain at least 8 teams in the league. Number 9, each club must have at least 3 league-approved 11v11 game fields or play the majority of games away from home. Each club must have a designated referee assigner to organize referees for their home facility. And under that is each club must offer an in-person grassroots referee course at least once every other year. Number 11, each club must have a financial assistance program in place that is easily accessible as part of the registration process. And those club financial assistance programs will be linked on the CDL website. Number 12, technical leaders must serve on at least one CDL subcommittee. And then 13, and finally, each club must remain in good standing by paying invoices in a timely manner. Failure to do so will result in expulsion from the league. And some of those later ones, there's timelines giving clubs the ability to push some of those dates and requirements down or beyond into 2022.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, so you'd mentioned 8 through 13 being left off. I think the difference here, Blake, is they've got club standards and then they got the individual standards, right? So then, so there's 2 different sets, and actually the CDL response. So before Iowa Soccer said no on February 22nd, the CDL gave a response, and they responded to the individual standards. But then what was a little bit different is they didn't even address the club standards at all. So it's sort of left, at least from the documentation, it left it, sort of for us to surmise or to speculate as to, what standards are really being addressed. But I think, the first question, so when you look at these club standards, for the CDL, the question is, what are the CDL clubs getting at? What are they trying to achieve here, with these standards? And
because each, the ISL, the ISA, and the CDL, their goal is all to improve players, develop players, right? And they all have ultimately the same core.
Yeah, and I think just like in writing, it looks like these are all standards that, foster or, would be good things or, promote player development, at least most of them. But, when you having sort of a knowledge of what comprises the Iowa Soccer Association clubs, you quickly realize that, some of these requirements, they're not easy to achieve. And so what the requirements quickly do is, just by their operation of being requirements, maybe not because it's intended to do so, but the reality is that, as the standards are applied, they start to eliminate a lot of clubs from being able to comply with the standards. If you look at, and so this is just my perspective, but if you look at just a historical perspective on the last 20 years of the landscape of youth soccer in our country, what we've seen a lot of clubs get bigger and bigger and then really big by operation of these mergers, and then by operation of becoming an affiliate of maybe of a professional organization or just a larger club. So for example, in Ankeny joined up with the Rush. So they're the Iowa Rush, and the Rush have 40,000 players across the country. Sporting Iowa has got tons of affiliates as well, and so and Sporting is a compilation of Johnston, Urbandale, and West Des Moines. And so, just from a historical perspective, in the last 20 years, the clubs have gotten really, really big, and it seemed like at least coming from the CDL side, or not even just the CDL side, but just the youth development side, most people were saying, or a lot of people were saying, hey, the bigger the club is, the more we can sort of individualize the needs of the players with similar ambitions and similar players, and or ambitions and abilities. And then in addition to that, the bigger you are, the bigger pool you have to draw through from, so the better players you might have. And so what I think these requirements feel like, it's just what it feels like, is that these are designed to keep the big clubs big and allow them to get bigger, while at the same time it isolates or ostracizes the little clubs who don't have resources. And so, if the CDL is a truly an elite league and it excludes some of those smaller clubs, then that's where the smart clubs are really going to have an issue with it. So I mean, I just look at some of these requirements, like, for example, number 3, each club must provide a league representative who can attend daytime meetings. But I mean, what does that mean? It means you've got a full-time staff, right?
Sure. So
there's
or
probably
someone with a super flexible job.
right. So there's probably the bigger clubs can do that. Other ones can't fulfill that standard. You got to have the number 4. You've got a B license or a USC Premier diploma. I can just tell you, when I got my C license, I had to go spend 10 days in Las Vegas. You had to pay a plane ticket. You had to, pay $1,000 for the course. So
we got to spend our time in Milwaukee. It's even better.
Nice. But it's a big commitment, right? So if you're a parent coach or a volunteer board running a small club, you can't get even a C license. The B license, I had to go to Georgia, outside of Atlanta, and do that. Other people have, the same thing with the primary diplomas or the UEFA licenses. They're big time cost commitments, and they're big time commitments. And so big clubs, like a lot of these CDL clubs, like Sporting, like BSA and stuff like that, they can hire people to do that. A lot of other clubs can't. And so just by operation of these standards, it starts to really exclude some of these clubs. And again, it's not overt on its face, but I think, when you look at probably what the Iowa Soccer Association's mantra is, which is to provide opportunities for everyone, these standards start to really be a problem from Iowa Soccer's perspective, I would assume. And so just having worked in a lot of in these clubs and seen some of them go through the mergers and heard some of these sort of the theories about bigger is better. To me, what it feels like is that's what these standards are designed to do, is put all the sort of the control within a small group of clubs, big clubs at that, to sort of dictate what player development looks like. And so the question then really is, to me, from a player development perspective in Iowa, where are we at? Where are we headed? And what really is best moving forward for just the youth of Iowa?
Well, I think on that note, that's a good little segue to the Iowa Soccer Association letter that they're going to hire an outside consultant to work with Iowa Soccer and the member clubs. So maybe that answer Iowa Soccer is looking for, and maybe that's the solution. I'm not sure, but I just thought that was an interesting point that, again, I don't know if anybody's aware, but Iowa Soccer is now trying to, and I think there's flaws with everything, right? And you can never please everybody, but an outside consultant may not, I don't know. It's interesting that they're doing that when they've got feedback from everybody. Both sides have given their opinions on what they would like to see.
So my interpretation of it would be that it's a neutral perspective, and that at this point in the game, with all the different personalities and opinions that are involved in the decision-making process, somebody like Dan Cataldi or whoever I'd say is saying, well, we need somebody in here to mediate a little bit and come in here and tell us, even if the answer, even if the ISA can say, hey, the answer is X, and it's very obvious, they want somebody that doesn't stand to gain or whatever from from that, I would guess, which, I mean, makes sense, but
Yeah.
it's also frustrating. That's where it gets to.
Right. Well, so I was February 22nd letter, just a couple of days ago. I mean, they pretty much, the feedback they definitely got was, and they say overwhelmingly clubs believe having all kids under one umbrella provides the best experience for players in Iowa. So it seemed like CDL and non-CDL clubs said, hey, it's better if everyone is together under one umbrella, right? And I think even, Matt Carver said that in the podcast the other week too. It's like, there's no doubt that Iowa soccer can do its job best if the player pool is bigger. And it's kind of sort of what these CDL clubs are saying anyway. It's like, if we're bigger, we can serve our memberships better as well. So the real disagreement or dispute here is, I think it's how that ISL league is run, right? I mean, that's what they're getting at. So Iowa Soccer said, look, all right, so we can't give you the CDL league, but we recognize that it's best if we keep everybody. We recognize that the ISL needs to be improved. And so how do we do that? And so what I gleaned from that is that's where the consultant's role comes into place. Now, I have an opinion about that as to whether or not a consultant would be needed in a situation like this. And I mean, I question why one is needed. I'm not saying I don't know all the inner workings of that, but to me, the solution is very simple. If the goal is to fix the ISL, there's a very, very simple solution. And if the goal is that, some of these CDL clubs are unhappy with the level of competition that they're getting, and that they think that these standards that they've set are going to, drive up that competition and result in real player development. And I think that the answer is, you can get rid of all your standards, but you're not going to need them so long as you create divisions in the ISL, you create a promotion relegation system, and you allow the best teams to rise to the top and play each other, and the second best and the third best to play in different divisions. And I think it would create a really fun league to follow, and then you're going to get exactly what you want, which is player development and good, meaningful games. And I don't think you need a consultant for that. I just think Garrett Smith is the head coach at Drake. He's, director of coaching here. He's got experience in our national staffs. I mean, certainly, he knows the promotion relegation system, from having been a fan and a player. I think there's still divisions, but the teams are responsible for reporting the scores, so who knows if that gets updated.
But I know for sure those they don't always get updated, and then it's just on the home team. And unless you're looking as an away team or vice versa, you don't know if they reported it correctly, let alone at all.
Well, and
whereas to me, like the referee,
sure,
that's where the referee that's the referee keeps score, right?
The arbitrator.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I just remember from my sort of last few years in the coaching game, thing that I was struck by was that the games that we would play in the fall, we wouldn't keep track, right? But then the next season would come around and we're seeding ourselves for State Cup, and the State Cup outcome, which wasn't always very favorable for us, was then what we were kind of judged on. But then if it comes down to two teams of comparable record in State Cup or whatever, then they are going to the ISL games. We're not keeping track of those. I guess I just recall those conversations being, a little bit subjective on the phone of whose teams are ranked where for State Cup, and all of a sudden it matters, but it's never mattered before. So now it matters for 3 games, and then off we go. So to me, that just never made sense from a coach standpoint, from a player standpoint. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, my 2 cents is that, everybody always talks about, or we always hear about development, right? And we never hear about winning. And and it's almost, the term winning is almost not, in line with development anymore. And I don't think anyone would ever say that, but
So quick tangent, why do you think that is?
I don't know.
Because it's cultural. It's not just this one little like situation we're talking about. It's like a cultural thing.
Well, I'll tell you, in like every other sport, they keep score,
Oh.
and the kids know. I mean, the kids know the score no matter what. There are standings. There's in wrestling a little bit. Some people outsiders may say crazy, but they even from 6-year-old, there's records. There's
So why do we discourage it? Because, in my opinion, is that you've got a movie like let's use like the Will Ferrell Kicking and Screaming movie, right? Where like you just got an image of somebody who's like losing their mind on the sideline over a youth soccer game, which is an image that's portrayed by Will Ferrell that you can see in real life, just like normal, not funny people losing their minds. Like, is that part of it? Is that people look at that and they go, well, that's unacceptable. We can't be screaming and yelling like that. So they won't, well, then let's make it not mean anything.
It could be part of it. I also think personally that it's and I mean this in the nicest way, I guess, but it's an easy way to not be held accountable for the way you're developing players, right? You can justify not winning because it's all about development. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of circumstances where it should be about development and not winning, and it really shouldn't be ultimately about winning. It should be about developing. But winning is a big part of it, and there's a lot of learning that can take place as a winner or a loser. But it also can motivate coaches to train their players harder, to not cancel sessions as much. So there's a huge accountability factor
Motivate
for
players
me,
too.
for the players and for the coaches and for everyone involved, and even for the parents picking the clubs. If you focused on winning, and by taking that away, I think we've lost the ability to keep each other essentially accountable for developing players in our state. And so, it just doesn't feel or seem like winning is important.
Well, to me, it's what you guys are sounding like is winning is a part of player development. And right now, winning is not any part of the player development pathway that we hear so much about. It's not the only thing, but it is one of the facets of player development, learning how to win, learning how to lose.
That's why it's confusing, because it does not matter, it is not emphasized. But then for 3 weeks in October or whatever, 3 weeks in May, it is emphasized, right?
Right. Well, so just talk about the ISL, right? It's not really a factor.
But
right?
And sorry, let me also add, and you're right, the ISL is not a factor, but then also you've got the President's Cup that added to State Cup to sort of like soften the blow of losing, so then you get another chance to continue playing.
Right.
But I can tell you from winning more President's Cups than I would like to admit, it is not a great feeling to win President's Cup, because if you won President's Cup, what was your target?
You're fifth best in State Cup.
Correct, but what was your target? To win
Right.
State Cup. So like you're just like, yeah, we definitely are the fifth best team.
And that, to
right
me,
now.
that's an easy solution. They're two completely separate events.
Right.
Teams enter President's Cup, teams enter State Cup, and because they're realistically some of the goal for some teams that may not be as quote good. President's Cup is a realistic and an achievable goal, where they should not be entering State Cup. There's a realistic goal for some of these kids and teams is a President's Cup championship, and that is great for them.
Right. And so it seems to me, it seems like this is a very easy solution, right? To sort of what winning back is counterintuitive as it seems based on what we've all been talking about in the last 2 years. Put winning back into the equation by developing a league structure within the ISL, which promotes the best teams to the top and the worst teams to the bottom. But it's inclusive of everyone, because there are no standards to get into the league other than what the Iowa Soccer Association sets. And
Super simple then, isn't it?
I really think it is, but I think so if that truly is the CDL's frustration, that the league isn't competitive enough or doesn't foster player development, then just revamp the league. And I don't think it takes, I think it doesn't really take too much discussion to say, hey, let's give that a whirl.
So you do hear about like the scheduling piece, right? Like that's a valid concern. I know Blake, like when you're still coaching out in Altoona, you'd have days where you're driving from Waukee to Altoona back to Waukee in one day for 3 different games.
Big and to me, it's an easy solution.
Well, that's why I'm just saying, like, we'll talk about what the easy solutions would be.
To me, the easy
and how
solution is, if you've got just say, let's pick out U14 girls, and there's, this is where the conflict, I think part of it arises. The CDL team from U14 girls have more than one team. Well, they only have one coach for those 2 teams or 3 teams. So that one coach has to cover, quote, what they think has to coach all 3. Well, that's where there's solutions from the league schedule to say, hey, schedule those teams back to back. And then the referees are sitting right there at the same field. Get an assistant, get a parent coach to fill in. Like Matt Carver mentioned that was kind of an interesting, different solution. But that, to me, those are, again, a little bit easier solutions to. And I don't think a non-CDL club, I don't think they would complain if they played a home game and after that, there was 2 random or 2 CDL teams playing on there that wasn't their home ground.
Sure.
Yeah, and so I'm a little bit different on the scheduling. I mean, I sympathize with those clubs and teams and coaches who have scheduling problems. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're choosing how to staff your club with coaches, you're choosing how many teams to take on, you're choosing how many coaches to give teams to. And so I think it's ultimately on the club and the teams to determine how they appropriately staff their game assignments, not necessarily the league. I think it should foster like some sort, an ease of being able to cover games. But I almost think that that's also unfair to some of these non-CDL clubs who they just say like, hey, we've got a parent volunteer coaching the club. Why is our schedule accommodating someone who's paying a coach a lot of money to coach 4 teams or whatever it looks like? And why can't that team just get a volunteer assistant?
Another thing,
so I'm not as sympathetic to that.
Yeah, understood. Another thing, I know it's a point that you've made before, whether it's here or elsewhere. And I think this should be part of this conversation that neither club is talking, or not neither club, neither side or any side is talking about is the actual schedule of the games, right? The calendar. Because what you're talking about is squeezing, 8 to 10 games in the spring, 8 to 10 games in the fall, in a very short period of time. So you're talking about scheduling a lot of games in a lot of time. And so sometimes
Short time.
in a short period of time, and you're forced to figure out how does that actually work. And so a lot of times you're forced into scheduling issues. And so you talk about, sympathy, like I find it hard to I have a lot of sympathy for somebody like Craig Winger, because I don't know how you necessarily schedule to make everybody happy. You're not going to make anybody happy. But if you had, instead of 2 8-week sessions for 16 weeks and you spread it out over 30 weeks over the year, it sounds a lot easier.
And that's some player development right there. The kids are playing.
Maybe they're playing once a week instead of 3 games every weekend.
Right, and then you're going to have an actual, you're going to have a meaningful table too, right? Because you're going to have 30 games, and you're going to have people that rise at the top and people rise, go to the bottom of the table, and you're going to have your structure. So that's the second simple one, right? So make it pro rel, make one season from April 1st through October 30th, maybe a couple of week break in the middle.
Yeah. Well, I wonder too, because you talk about these club coaches who it's a full-time job. They do really load up in season. If you're in the middle of if it's May in the spring and you're coaching 3 or 4 days a week, 3 or 4, maybe even more, 5 or 6 hours a night, depending on the deal, and then you've got weekend stuff. You are busy during that period of time. But then the counter piece of that is then you're pretty dead during other periods of the year. Wouldn't you rather just have a consistent work schedule? I don't know. I think
the answer is the calendar. We've talked about that for how long now? The calendar needs to be changed. Get rid of it. The first 2 weeks, 3 weeks of the season in March there's always so many cancellations because it rains. And you end in June 5th because of tryouts.
Right.
And nobody can do anything until midday of whatever that is. And then you don't start up again until after the state fair when school starts. And then you end November 1st, and
Right, you're off again.
maybe we should throw our hat in the ring for a
The consultant.
Yeah.
If you're Dan and Peter, if you're listening, we're offering the consult. We're digging for the consultancy job.
Yeah, I'm
It'll be
sure
a
that-
short job, really, though, because you just got to listen to the podcast.
Yeah, for them, it'll go over well.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things I've just kind of thought about is like, well, two things. Number one, I don't know if you guys saw the announcements yesterday on social media. So it looks like the ECNL boys side has created the Heartland division, and so I know Sporting shared just the notification that they're in the ECNL boys Heartland division. VSA did as well. We saw some Omaha teams. So the only reason I bring that up is, obviously that's clearly been in the works for a little bit. But what that would mean is that like at least Sporting boys and girls are in the ECNL from 15s to 18s, I think. I mean, I'm not sure about lower, but so really what's the, why do you need the CDL if your top teams are in the ECNL in the first place? That would be an interesting sort of answer to that question coming from their perspective. Why is that needed? Because you would think you'd want your younger teams in a league with lots of teams, so that otherwise you're basically guaranteeing that, your 11s through 14s only play against 9 or 10 different clubs, and then they go into the ECNL later on. So it'd be kind of I'd like to know the answer to that.
Yeah. Going back to the promotion relegation conversation too, especially when you start talking about the ECNL thing, it just strikes me that like if all these clubs are like if the CDL clubs are upholding the standard that they're requiring, they should in theory be the top clubs in the state, right? So if it's promotion relegation, they should win, and then they should have like the top table should be the CDL clubs in theory, right?
Right.
So, and I get that, like in practice, there's going to be a situation where you've got a bum age group, or there's some team from Sioux City that's fantastic in the age group, and so then they slide in. Is that part of the problem too? Then is that they worry, say, okay, well, Blake and then his brother Colin both play for whatever club, name the club, Johnson Dragon United back in the day, right? If you're gonna Rhonda and Kim are gonna take you to go play for Iowa United in that sense, of course that's where Colin's gonna play, right? Is that part of the problem? Like the clubs are concerned about, well, Blake's gonna play for Iowa United, but then Colin, well, what if Colin's either not very good, which he wasn't? Sorry, Colin. Or are they gonna be like, what do you do in that situation, right? Is Colin gonna go play for the other crappy club? Then now because I think that's part of what the parents are selling is to say, okay, they're buying. So they're saying, hey, if I'm going to take my kid to one club, I can take all my kids to the same club. And so it's one trip. You know what I mean? Like, is that part of it too?
From the CDL club's perspective, or
From these big club, like a big club.
I don't know.
It's not even a conversation. Did I just take us in the wrong direction?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the bigger. I mean, I think any club wants as many kids. Clubs don't make cuts, right?
There's budgets.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason why.
Yeah.
Kids don't get cut in ODP and in club soccer. Like, there's real numbers that need to be met.
To me, the concern from any club would be if you set it up for promotion relegation, is you might get found out. So to your point, Ben, I mean, if the CDL club standards are what matters, if that's what drives player development, then every single CDL club should always be at the top of the table in every single division, right? Because they can satisfy these conditions. But if that's not true, then you're going to have teams from Sioux City and other teams from Des Moines and stuff like that pop it back in. And I think, that's what my suspicion is, that, the design of these standards doesn't necessarily foster player development. It gives power and control to the CDL clubs. But like really the way to really compete or create a competitive environment, it's allow everybody to compete. And realistically, it shouldn't be a problem. Let's just take Des Moines Soccer Club, right? Ream's over there now, and so let's just say that they've got a under 14 boys team who's coached by a parent coach, and they are good. And that parent coach played at a high level in college, but you know what? Never went and got his licenses. Why can't Des Moines Soccer Club play in the top division of a promotion relegation system in the ISL and knock off anybody in the state and be the best?
Especially if they've proven that they can compete.
Exactly. And so why should they be kept out of a league that's, with all of these standards? So the fear, I think, from anyone would be, hey, we're going to lose players to the Moines Soccer Club. And I think the same thing goes with like Sporting or VSA or Rush or something like that. If you're in the top division, you got the top team. The fear is if winning matters, is we might lose players. But to me, that's really what creates the competitive environment that actually fosters player development. And we just don't have that. The other thing I'd say too is all these leagues now, they're forcing people to travel out of state, right? You're going to go, and which is fine. I mean, it's part of it. It's always been part of it. But to me, where we should be headed in this state is we should be encouraging as many clubs as possible to join the Iowa Soccer Association in as many communities as possible. And even more than just clubs, teams as well. Get them in the system, create a competitive environment so that you get competitive meaningful games in Iowa. Don't force people to travel out of the state. Develop clubs like UFA, like Des Moines Soccer Club, like a club in Norwalk or in Carlisle, like Iowa Storm. All these different clubs. It only benefits us to keep you all in a league and make it a competitive league. And then all of a sudden you're not going to have to go outside the state looking for as much, especially for your second, third, fourth teams.
Yeah, again, it comes down to State Cup, which is a whole nother podcast in and of itself, right? Because that's ultimately the reason this conversation between the three groups is the CDL wants to be in State Cup. And I got my opinions on that. But yeah, that's it's almost kind of all boils down to that, doesn't it? The State Cup. That's the reason why we're having this discussion.
Yeah. So a question that I would have if I'm listening, if we've reviewed the CDL standards or policies, that are going to get people into your league. What are the standards or requirements to play in the Iowa Soccer League?
I think you've got to be an Iowa Soccer Association member club, and I think you've got to have a certain amount of teams, I think, in your club to get into the league. I think so.
So that's where Matt Carver's, we had to file the grievance because you couldn't just, you wanted to be an Iowa Soccer Association member. We got denied. So I don't know, that's Ben, you keep that question for Dan, because I don't know.
Big DC.
Well, that was just Iowa Soccer. I mean, the soccer league, I think, is even different. I think you got to have,
X number of teams.
I think so, yeah. But by the way, Iowa Soccer should never, maybe never is not the right word, but almost never deny a team or a club who wants to become a member. I think that people may have had a difference in how Matt Carver went about his business in terms of breaking away from the Urbandale board and starting a new club. I know there was a fight over those fields, but if someone has a different idea of how they want to develop players, and perhaps for a lower cost, to exclude that person or group, I think that's inexcusable. And I was disheartened to hear that story from Matt Carver on the podcast, because I think one of the places we're headed, which I think the CDL clubs and the bigger clubs really have to look at now, is this whole idea like you allow parent coaches, right? Every single club now should be begging for parent coaches to be coaching their select teams. For this reason, because the parents now are knowledgeable about soccer.
Well, we had this conversation offline yesterday about parent coaches. Like, I'm for parent coaches. I think that I learned a lot from lots of parent coaches over the years, including my own father, which I'm sure he's not listening to this, so I won't have to give him the actual credit for it. But yeah, man, a lot of those guys are really, really impactful.
The
You know,
parent coaches now, like, so Ben Harshbarger's a parent coach, right? He's got three kids. He's coaching a group and a team. He doesn't have any of his licensing, but there should be nothing that would preclude him from coaching the top players in the state if his, you look at, Blake's a parent. Some of the coaches in the club, Whitney Sharp or Whitney Lewis now, she's a parent coach. Tim Dobberholz, he's a parent coach. Brian Duack's a parent coach. Eric Berg's a parent coach.
almost all of the coaches that are even at no matter what club they're at, they've got kids that are somehow involved in the game. Some are super competitive players, but then you've got like somebody like Matt Ream who would fully admit to you that he's just happy that his kid goes out and puts on a jersey and is willing to go hang out and try and enjoy it for a little bit.
Right. But I think that's why 20 years ago, I don't think we're in the same spot. I don't think there was a crop of knowledgeable people with kids as there are now. And so, to me, that's why the position now is it's got to be to foster and advance these community clubs and to welcome people in who want to just coach their kids for free and maybe not spend as much money because they can get equally or better training environments from parent coaches now that they come sometimes. If you go into a club with a professional coach that's getting paid,
But that's what I'm saying too. Is we were talking about some of our parent coaches over the years. Even though I wasn't being coached by Blake, who's been playing the game for 20 years. I was getting coached by, a guy that played football and basketball, and had a couple kids that played, but he was a great coach. He was a coach, not a soccer coach, but a coach, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing I would question, as far as I haven't taken a coaching course in a long time, a soccer coaching course, but how often do they actually talk about just coaching principles, not necessarily soccer?
I think that's where, right, you say, hey, CDL clubs, you can keep your own standards, don't form your own league, and there's multiple opinions and ways to quote develop a player, and everybody's got their own one. So if that's your thought and your belief, do it. And if the league is set up the right way, you will rise to the top and keep producing all these players and have it basically your way and show everybody that you've done it well.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I guess this is where I would kind of look around the room and see if there's some more comments to be made or not. Are there other items you'd like to touch on?
No, I think I would just summarize where I think more my opinion is anyway what we talked about. First of all, I think it would totally be a bad thing if the CDL clubs left Iowa soccer, right? I think you want to keep them in the mix, but I think everyone recognizes that the league's got to get better, right? And I don't even think the non-CDL clubs would say that. And so, to me, the path forward, the negotiation forward, to me has to be get the ISL into a promotion relegation structure, change the season, but give it one season because that's needed anyway. And that's your very, very simple solution. And so then, if some of the clubs want to get into ECNL and some of the other groups, great. But at least you have a promotion relegation mechanism that serves all of the players in the state. And don't limit coaches from coaching kids because they don't have licenses. That's the only other point I would make. When I was 22 when I first started coaching, I didn't have a license. I was coaching, and no one ever told me I shouldn't coach because I don't have a license. And I'm still coaching select players and the best players in some age groups. Every person on that CDL list of coaches at some point came into the profession without a license and without some of these things in place and was coaching still good players in Iowa. And so it's really hard to accept those standards to get into the league or even to have to aspire to those standards, knowing where, all of us began our coaching careers. So, just kind of in sum, I think that's just a very simple solution. And we'll send Iowa Soccer an invoice when they accept our proposal.
Yeah. I think really quick, man, you You could make the promotion relegation, you wouldn't need 20 teams. You know, you could do it with a 10, you know, have multiple divisions, but just with only 10 teams or 8 teams or 12 teams. So the games aren't super lopsided. The games are still competitive, but just maybe have 8 divisions instead of
Right.
3 big ones.
Yeah, maybe only like the top team and the bottom team go up or down. Right, as opposed to.
Yeah, there's
There's all sorts of different ways to do it. Well, I mean, you could also have like a Champions League too. That'd be sweet. Like all the age, like the high school Champions League. There you go.
Well, that's your
There's another
state
idea,
cup.
too.
That's your state cup, though, isn't it? Like,
No, it's beyond state cup Champions League.
Okay. All right.
Well, Matt, thanks for coming on, sharing your thoughts, your opinions, and hopefully the listeners found it beneficial.
See you guys in high school season, right?
Can't wait. All right, Blake. Good chat. It's always nice to have a conversation with Matt Sahag.
That was fun.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, fun. Fun's definitely what I would call it. So what do you think? We got all sorts of. We just in the first part we talked about all the different interviews we've got coming up. Plus we're working on some other fun stuff too. Some cool Legends interviews.
Like you said, we're getting into the meat and potatoes of the high school season, so that's starting here coming up in mid-March. We got our big high school futsal battle
Yeah, right on.
coming up. That's free at the Birdland Mini Pitch.
Gratis.
See.
If you haven't been following our social media, we were just recently on La Buena's. We were kind of like over at the lunch hour chatting about the futsal battle and test our Spanish skills. I would say we passed with like an F+, I would say.
Yeah, it was fun. It was good. So again, join the supporters club. Follow us on social media. If you want to kind of check us out in our new little digs here for this episode, go to our YouTube channel, which has been getting some pretty good traction as well.
Yeah, right on. Let's just
Sign
look forward. I was going to say, let's look forward to next week. See you all soon.